It's been a big week for religion and reality TV. Domestic abuse and child sexual torment have featured in headlines about, at this point, 4 different reality shows that majorly center the faith of the perpetrators. Here's what I find interesting. In both of these interactions, that with the Utah Funny Handshake cult and the other with the fundamentalist breeder group, accusations of these behaviors existed for years before the shows themselves were canceled. The only thing surprising at this point, and with the news this week, is that people are even surprised. So often, religion infantilizes their members by giving them the out. All have sinned and fallen short before the glory of God. I've heard those words said to me personally more times than I can count. These beliefs allow members to shrug away accountability for their actions, to act as if all that happened was some oopsie, a sin for which you're already forgiven or can be forgiven easily, and nothing more than what anyone else has done. This all makes for real garbage people, but for great reality TV, so thank goodness for that, right? I guess, what are your thoughts? Does the way in which religion is portrayed in reality television show us a glimpse of those faiths? Are these kinds of crimes treated differently when committed by a person of faith? Do you think I'm grasping at straws? Let us know. Call in, because the show starts right now.
All right, welcome everyone. Today is March 22nd, 2026. I'm your host, Christy Powell, and stepping up like a last-minute superhero is Ben Clodfelter. Jamie the Blind Limey will be joining us throughout the show. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines, so get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. Jack, I see you waiting on the line. Thank you so much for calling. Ben, I am not a big reality TV person, but I am actually really kind of fascinated to get into all of this today. Reality TV, especially reality TV about religion, is such a, I don't know, bizarre outsider fascination for me. What's your relationship with some of this stuff?
Yeah, I haven't been a fan of reality TV for a long time. I had, growing up in Denver, the Real World showed up at one point, and mostly I was just off put because they closed down one of my favorite bars for them to live in.
Sure.
But in recent years, this crossover between fundamentalist Christianity and reality TV with like Duck Dynasty, growing up, whatever show the Duggars were originally on, there's a real propensity, and it seems that like people of more fundamentalist and evangelical faiths have found this as kind of a platform that they can normalize their behavior in front of the world, and putting forward, they have the money to do it, and clearly they're popular. And I think for like the religious people, they get to see their values reflected in something, a piece of media. And then for people that aren't involved, it normalizes like, oh, they're kind of like me too. And so it's sort of a win-win for them. And especially in the last few decades with the Duggars, with Duck Dynasty, with so many other spaces, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
I mean, so many of these shows. Yeah.
Yeah. That we see this, and then the way the members of those religious faiths even treat the people that are, in many cases being filmed going against their values or behaving in such a way that they should scorn or be against, they justify it and rationalize it away. And so it also can put the hypocrisy on open display. And so like in the last year or so, I've started noticing more of these things, and then guilty pleasure, finding myself watching from time to time.
Sure.
And then what's happening now with yet another Duggar being arrested for sexual crimes, and then a Mormon wife, domestic violence, and just kind of highlighting that domestic violence can go both ways, regardless of gender or religion or what have you. It's something that needs to be addressed, but it oftentimes gets brushed aside because they're famous or because they're a person of faith.
Yeah, and I hear that point that you're making about how these programs can kind of normalize some of these belief systems. I mean, many of the Duggar children have talked explicitly about how this was viewed as sort of a ministry and a pulpit for them to get some of these messages out. I don't know. I'm also reminded about something Michael Pollan wrote, kind of correlating the rise in cooking television shows with people
Nice.
cooking at home less and less and less. And so maybe that's a glass half full interpretation, but I do wonder, as we see in study after study, our culture becoming progressively less religious, is there an element of kind of being curious about how these people still continue to live? I don't know. There's a lot to get into here, and I'm definitely excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk to everybody out there who is watching. We are tri-streaming today, so a big shout out to everybody on TikTok and YouTube mobile. We would love to hear from you as well. This is Talk Heathen, which is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. I want to thank you, Ben, for stepping into this role, and for Jamie the Blind Limey for coming in very much at the last minute to help back up, as well as everybody else on the crew who has been here for hours trying to get everything worked out at the physical studio and behind the scenes. So I want to pull up that crew cam and just say thank you to all of the video and audio people, the moderators, notes and stamp takers, all of our call screeners, and everybody that makes this organization work. And remind people that we're always looking for volunteers, that volunteer at atheist-community.org is a great place for you to get involved, whether it is in front of the camera or behind the scenes. We are a beautiful organization with so much more to offer than just what you see here on YouTube and TikTok and all of these other places. And I hope that people out there will get off the sidelines and get involved with us.
Yeah, for sure. We're actually getting kind of a big push. I also moonlight as the volunteer coordinator for the ACA. And so if you want to have a conversation with me in my wonderful, lovely face, fill out the volunteer form. You'll probably get a meeting with me and sit down and talk about the ways you can get involved, because we're doing so much of the building. We're doing so much to outreach into the community, to connect with organizations like the American Humanist Association. We have some things on the horizon that we're planning on doing work with them and others. So it's a really exciting time to be getting involved. It kind of feels like being on the ground floor of building, even though I know the ACA has been around for so long, but it kind of like feels like we're building something new and exciting.
It does come in waves. I've definitely been here long enough to see it sort of reinvent itself and evolve in a number of different ways. And it does feel like right now something new and interesting is happening behind the scenes. And I'll be very excited to hopefully meet some new faces and to see where all of this goes and what direction we're all headed in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm very eager to bring Jamie in and get into this conversation. But first, let's talk to Jack in Massachusetts, who wanted to share some of his experiences as a former believer. Jack, how you doing this morning?
Hey, good, thanks. Yes. I just wanted to say thank God I'm from Massachusetts, because, I hear a lot of these stories from people. A lot of evangelicals and that have struggled to walk away from their religion, and I went through that process here, but it's not the same process, and it just seems like very much different culturally. It's not a stigma. I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school. Everyone I knew was Irish Catholic. Only met a couple of Protestants, and I was an altar boy. Everyone went to church every week. We had 5 masses on the weekend. And now they have 1 mass at this church, and it's a smaller group than, any of the 5 masses.
Wow.
And,
yeah, I believe that. That kind of matches
here.
a lot of the trends we're seeing around the country. But to see it in sort of your home parish in that way can really strike home.
Yeah, and because we have, this is New England, we have beautiful churches in every town, but really nobody goes. I see it's just it's not a big part of people's lives here. And, as for me personally, when I got away from this, a lot of my friends, we were all, part of that group. Everyone went to church, and then now people don't. Typically they'll go on Christmas and Easter.
Right, yeah, the C&E crowd.
The holiday Christians, yes.
Yeah, so the Holly and Lily people. But we it's just it's different here. And like with my family, when I brought this up, it wasn't, it was almost, a common thing. It was more of a bit of trivia that, I wasn't into it anymore or anything. It wasn't, I've not seen any of this stigma or struggle with people, at least in my community. I'm sure it's different in different places, but
Sure.
just from growing up in a Catholic town with Catholic people, and I just wonder why that's so different here versus, I guess, down south or wherever you're located. It's just a different cultural view. It's not, it's more accepted. It's just, I know it's a liberal area, but there's no big issue with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely there are different forms of Christianity. I mean, there are as many forms of Christianity as there are Christians. And so that's maybe one place to start, is just the notion that particularly down in the South, where you're seeing more evangelicals, but also more like evangelical leaning faith traditions, there is less of a once saved, always saved kind of doctrine. And there's perhaps like more fear over what it means to backslide or to step away. But yeah, the social pressures here are definitely a little different. Everybody's community is going to be unique. But I know that as I walked away from my faith, I kept it a damn secret for the longest time. There can be an incredible amount of pressure, an incredible amount of judgment, and what I believe sometimes to be genuine concern, and what I very much see as faux concern, or sort of this like hero complex that people often have when they see people around them walking away from faith. There are just so many different vectors for that God virus, and there's such a push to be evangelizing, to be spreading the good message and keeping everybody in the fold.
Yeah, and I went through that for a while myself. I didn't, but I did kind of keep it a secret. And then for a while I was, I'd call it just in case Catholic. The whole thing about like, well, I might as well believe because if it's real, then I don't want to go to hell.
Yeah, just hedging your bets in Pascal's wager.
Right. There's a lot associated with we get a lot of people.
That held up for a while. Yeah, and I think for a while I thought, well, it's 50-50, so I might as well, believe, because that's my, there's a 50% chance. But I realize that's not how the probability would work in this case. So,
yeah,
I got past that, but.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating, because we all kind of think that way, and especially as we're deconstructing. I remember going through the similar type of thought process. And then in the deconstruction for me, I remember hitting a point of how did I decide it was 50-50? Where did I come up with that probability? There doesn't seem to be any real math to this. It's just kind of probabilities of the vibes. And it's right. Sort of, I've invested this much time and energy. And I know for me, another part of it, I was in the military when I came out as an atheist, or accepted that I was an atheist. And there was a real realization that suddenly every prayer we were doing at a big formation, or every single time the chaplain would come to talk to us, that it was oh, people will perceive me different. The treatment I may get will be different. Maybe I'll just call myself an agnostic or something else esoteric, pantheist, so people won't bother me. But then when it really, push came to shove and I was faced with, I really don't believe this. And then I was reading Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, and there was a point where he called out pantheists, and I was I just can't look away from this anymore. But yeah, it's really tough to go through those struggles.
Did it for me too.
Mm-hmm. There's I think it's in one of the early chapters where he does just this type of theist, this type of theist. Here's the rebuttal to each, and I was just I felt so called out, this is me, and I don't like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
Jack,
it was that book, and it was Religialist for me.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
Jack, I know you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. What you believe is what you believe. And while we may have some control over those beliefs, our thoughts are not completely under our domain. We can't just flip a switch and decide to suddenly become Buddhist or Muslim or whatever else. That being said, even if it wasn't necessarily a choice from a certain point of view, I mean, how has walking away from religion made your life better, made it worse? I mean, has there been sacrificing community, sacrificing comfort around hell, or a connection with God? I mean, what has it been like, and how has it benefited you, and how has it cost you to get to this place you're at now?
Yeah, well, first off, my Sundays are much better.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't have to go. I don't have to get up and go to church and listen to the exact same words that I hear every week. So that was a benefit, and I don't have to worry about hell. And I think that's a big problem with with religious people, is that that's hanging over their head. There's a thought that that could happen to them, and I don't have that. So so that's a benefit there, and just to be able to, I got into, the scientific, the realities of life that we've learned, and I think that's much more fascinating. That's like the greatest show on earth, right? You have, you have all this scientific study of how things came to be, and I think that's much more of a story, much more breathtaking than the religious thing. And then here's a thought experiment for you. If there was a book, if the Bible started out with, in the beginning there was a big bang, and then it went through all of history, how the stars were formed, how the earth was formed, how life began, how evolution works, and all that, and we found this book, would you believe that at that point, where you had all that, somebody actually provided the real information back then? Would that change your view now of whether there's someone in control of this?
Ben, I'm not sure where you're at, but I guess I'm having a little bit of a hard time following the kind of particulars of your thought experiment here. Certainly there are old books, and certainly some of those old books are full of what we understand to be accurate information. That doesn't get me to God. So help me understand what you're asking here.
What I'm saying is, if the Bible actually had a true depiction of the origin of the universe and life and everything, would that change the way you look at this?
I mean, it wouldn't be the Bible. Right? Like if the Bible said, if it made a little bit more sense, right? If we got away from like the whole God created the heavens and the earth in 7 days, and there was light and there was plants, and then eventually there was a sun. And, if that whole situation made a little bit more sense, then yes, it would make the Bible more compelling. But also, are we still having people coming back from the dead? Are we still having talking donkeys? Like, at a certain point, I guess I'm not sure how to deconstruct all of this. I'm willing to believe anything that makes good sense and that is well evidenced. And if you're trying to describe to me a version of a religious text that fits those criteria, then it maybe stops being a religious text.
Yeah. No, just wondering, because, reading the Bible, there's all those, talking donkey stories. It makes it so much more difficult to believe any of it, right? If there was more truth and less magical, things going on, it may be more believable, I guess. But to look at it as it is, I just can't see how anyone can believe that story.
Yeah, well, at least from the perspective of like memetics and thinking of, well, why did the Bible, for instance, continue to proliferate? And why has Christianity and Judaism before it and these other faith systems, why do they exist when so many other religions have disappeared off the face of the earth over the last several thousand years, just talking about the ones we know about? I might make the argument that some of the completely ridiculous stuff, Jonah being swallowed by a whale, some of these things, they are actually effective at sort of giving it that, like, what is this? And making it stand out, making it interesting and compelling in a way that draws people to it. You need a little bit of like fantasy in your myth. You need a little bit of magic in your lore to keep people sucked in. And so from a certain point of view, that might be a feature rather than a bug, But ultimately, in my 2026 brain, when I read those stories, do they draw me towards the God of the Bible? I mean, not in the least bit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to kind of speak to, that perspective of, we have our conception of like, this is in fact how the universe was created, et cetera, and we're definitely closer to that truth than they were then. But when they wrote these books, that was the correct answer. Like, they were fully convinced that like, oh no, this is in fact the truth. And so it's effectively, if they had more science facts as we understand them correct in this book, is it basically just a God of the gaps kind of perspective that like in another 100 years, they're going to read the book. Like, let's say we updated the Bible to have the creation myth fully comport with our current understanding of cosmology. In 100 years, would they look at it and be like, I can't believe people believed this stuff in such a simple and contrived way, and like so silly. So
they'd believe it a little more.
Sure, yeah. But like to Christy's point, at what point are you reading a science book and not a religious text? Because if you did put all that stuff, the religions that had very discrete and disprovable claims aren't really followed religions anymore. And so having it be kind of loosey-goosey and not tied to the facts or kind of ethereal actually is a defense mechanism. It makes it a more like defensible religious platform. And that's why I think you don't generally see those kind of very discrete claims made in most popular religious texts.
Yeah. Well, I took mythology class in high school, and there was a point when I started thinking, this sounds a lot like what I'm learning on Sundays. You know, but even then, I just figured, well, they're all stories, and this one's real. But I did make that connection, like, you know, hey, this sounds a lot like Zeus.
Yeah. I mean, like flood myths, and you know, there's so many sort of common religious tropes buried in the Bible, and it was legitimately shocking to me to get. I mean, for me, it was honestly high school, really college, before I started to recognize some of those trends and some of those tropes, and to realize that, like, oh, this is not as unique as we have been told our whole lives it truly is. Anybody who studies the Bible from an academic standpoint starts to recognize that you need faith for this thing to stand up on its own.
Yeah, and I think even in philosophy, there's the understanding that like more generalized and vaguer positions are the easiest to defend, but also then say the least. And so the proclivity for religious dogmas to make these generalizations or broader statements that are more easily defensible that allows. It's why we have like 41,000 different denominations of just Christianity, because then in that space of non-distinctness, so many individuals can insert their own opinion into what is truth. And it's a really dangerous weapon because it can be used for so much good and so much bad.
Yeah, a virus has to be able to adapt and mutate in order to continue to spread.
Even on reality TV.
Yeah. Jack, how does all that strike you and kind of square with your experiences looking back on your own faith?
Yeah, it's great talking to you guys, and it's good to have somebody kind of that I can watch and agree with, and you know, see, think like I do, and yeah, I think this is great, and yeah, I just wanted to get that out there that, you know, there are cultural differences in different places, and it does affect how you go about things. How you come out whatever as a non-believer, and I think that there's a lot of places in the country where that is just it's such an issue for people, and it's too bad. It's too bad that, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of closet non-believers in the evangelical community that just don't come out, and it's a lot easier around here.
Yeah, even the Clergy Project is an amazing like data point on that even amongst people that are still active priests and preachers, etc., a certain percentage of them just don't believe it and have reached out to groups like the Clergy Project, which can act as a resource for former ministers and people of the cloth or religious leaders. But a huge chunk of their, of their members are still doing it. And so even when you're in this space and like Christians talk about like fellowship and coming together and looking across the aisles and whatever, and everyone, I know everyone is on my side and we're all part of the same larger community. Actually, you don't know what's in those people's heads. And like your own reverend may be part of the Clergy Project and he's doing this for a paycheck and he doesn't know what else he would do with his life, or like, they find that like this is the mechanism whereby I can do good because I counsel people, I guide people on ethics and decisions in their lives. And so like maybe I don't believe all this, but it's still a way that I perceive I can do good. So it's interesting how we build up in our heads, and it's making me think about like communities. And I wanted to ask, do you have a community or organization near you that you participate in, like an atheist community?
No, I wish I had something here.
Well, Massachusetts, I'm almost certain there are. I don't know off the top of my head.
Seems like there would be. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'll often tell people check out American Atheist website. Has a really great resource tool where you can find atheists in your area. For anyone in Texas, you can find the ACA on there. But it's the map of the U.S. and they've got all these points on it, and you can zoom into where you are and find who's in your area. Because I think one of the things most religions get right is we all benefit from working together, collaborating together, being in a space together, and supporting one another. And a lot of atheists, we were talking about deconstruction, a lot of us have to kind of leave that behind when we decide we don't believe anymore. So being able to find that out in the world again, I think is a really useful tool, and it can help with loneliness. It can help with like when you're having the thoughts of like, what if I burn in hell? Having some people to go talk to and just hang out with can help a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I appreciate you giving us a call and being a part of our community in this way, watching the shows and joining us online. And I really would invite you to look into your local organizations or folks who are local to this organization to, see what it's like in person to be a part of these communities.
Okay. Thank you, and I will keep watching.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you.
Yeah, Ben, to your kind of previous point, that was something I was a little bit shocked to realize when I started doing religious trauma work, to recognize how many people sort of go along to get along or have to pretend to be a part of these things. When I led my first religious trauma group, I was shocked that of the 8 members there, all 8 said that they had pretty much never been truly sincere believers, that they had always been kind of faking it. And I was the lone person who was like, oh no, I was dyed in the wool. Like I was down. I absolutely believed all of this. And so there is a very real trauma experience that comes from recognizing like, oh no, there is not a perfect, all-knowing, all-loving God who would do anything for me. And that is its own pain. But there is also a unique suffering that comes from kind of having to live a lie, having to give lip service, having to play along to fit into these communities, to these families.
Yeah, it's a death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing. When just the number of times you bite your tongue or you keep a thought to yourself, and you're not really giving yourself the opportunity to live your truth and express or even question things. I think a lot of people, it causes them to shrink into what they are or what they think they're capable of doing or participating in. But yeah, like it still always surprises me the number of people that are active in their churches that don't actually believe. Like we just started up the Atheist Vanguard project here and doing more volunteerism. So I was helping host philosophy night and talking about the Atheist Vanguard, and I brought up and I just like surveyed the room of like, how many of you have done volunteer work before? And we went around the room, and the number of people that were like, I've done a lot of volunteering, it was through my church. And it was just, even amongst atheists, so many atheists do volunteering through a church because they don't feel like they have another opportunity to. And it's sobering. It'd be interesting if we could ever get to a horizon where people felt the license to be open and honest and share their opinion, what those statistics would actually look like.
Yeah. I mean, as we see more and more statistics pointing to the idea that most people, or certainly fewer people than in the past, acknowledge that they don't believe in a god or gods. And yet, it's still kind of hard to be out in that way. Like, you're not allowed to describe yourself in that way. It's sort of a, like, don't ask, don't tell. We don't really go to church, and you can sort of figure out for yourself what that means. But to take on that label of atheist or agnostic or some of these terms, it's seen as like militant and transgressive in so many ways. And it does make it that much harder to form community and to create opportunities for people to, circle the wagons and be volunteering together and working towards our shared goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's like the work we're doing here at the building. We've tried to be explicit to, like, I don't really care what you label yourself with. What I care about is, like, what are our shared values? What's our intent in trying to make the world a better place? But it's unfortunate that, like, atheist has such, and in some ways it's earned. If you've ever spent time on r/atheist, you're like, okay, yeah, some of us are really annoying.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that could be said of any Reddit forum, to be fair. I mean, you could be very into cats or reality TV and find those types of folks out on Reddit. But you're not wrong. You know, I work primarily with atheists, often folks who are kind of wrapping their head around their atheism or are in that, like, early phases of deconstruction. And yeah, there can be some know-it-allness, there can be some smugness, and there can be some real anger that comes from walking away from these beliefs. Yeah.
Well, and, like, I always try to hold space for, it makes sense for someone to be really angry, especially shortly after, if you've invested a lot of your life into your religious faith, and then to have that kind of fall apart before your eyes, and then suddenly you're seeing more clearly the world.
Absolutely.
It makes sense to be really upset. And I try to hold space for, like, because, we get people here in our community that will show up and they're just the quintessential or stereotypical angry atheist. And some people are like, oh, can't stand these people. But it's like, well, maybe we can try to hold space for everyone. Because what they're going through is deconstructing trauma that they went through. They got gaslit for however many years of their lives, and they're pissed now. But how do we then also accept them and then address, how do we use this energy and this anger and this deconstruction to do some good in the world or make it productive rather than just only being attacking and tearing down and ostracizing people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I very much appreciate you working to expand that tent and create that community. I will say that we have already had some super chats come in, and I'll remind everybody that is a great way to support us. We will read them all as we get closer to the end of the show. We do have some open lines, and we'd love to hear from you. But Ben, what do you say we go ahead and bring in Jamie and talk a little bit more about some of the things you mentioned at the top, as I suppose reality TV fans are sort of like spinning this week, or maybe eating it up with popcorn. I couldn't say.
Am I coming through, gentlemen?
You are.
Yes, you are. What is your relationship with reality TV, Jamie?
So it was massive during the late 90s and early aughts, the Big Brother phenomenon.
Sure.
My family are massively into reality TV of all stripes. And
I did a handful of years of Survivor as a teenager, and maybe even into my early 20s.
Yeah, but the thing is with reality TV, and I was mentioning this while we were in the sort of green room before the show, that it's not reality. It's not even close. There's a creator who some people out there may know. His name's Charlie Brooker. He wrote the series Black Mirror. But before he did that, he did a show called Screen Wipe, where he was talking about the more technical stuff about TV. And he showed exactly what clever editing and music and stuff you can build the narrative out of pieces. And when we are in a media landscape that is increasingly being encroached upon by those that would want to normalize what some may have previously seen as extreme Christian dogma or lifestyles, and make people seem relatable and normal. I mean, normal's such a fudgy word, but you know what I mean.
Sure.
That like, there's nothing scary about being a Mormon. We're just like you guys, and with a couple of weird little habits as we do. And there's nothing wrong with having 16 kids. Look how well we're doing and how happy everyone is on camera. And then, it all comes out afterwards. And this is in many... and you were making the comparison earlier, the way that the people who are on these religious shows or of a religious background, the way that they are treated by not only their communities, but also kind of a bit by the media surrounding them, is very much in contrast to people who have scandals, who aren't overtly religious or were not on reality TV shows that are religiously based. I remember many tabloid headlines in the 2000s of lurid details of previous lives of contestants on these shows or whatever would fill up the dirt rags. But I don't see that so much here with people like the Duggars until it's really like you literally can't ignore it.
Becomes fully egregious.
Yeah, it gets reported on, but then everyone comes out the woodwork, and by say everyone, people who are nominally ecclesiarchically aligned on these people's belief wavelength. Those are all real words that I didn't just make up. But people who align with them, who are we to judge? Only God can judge, and his final judgment will come. I trust in the Lord to see this man put back to rights. And Ben, you were making a point earlier that a lot of the morality is also skewed to the power dynamics of the religions. Like, if being immoral as a man is kind of just seen as a thing that's always potentially going to happen, and then it's on the people who they victimize to make themselves less tasty targets, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I feel like even in the non-religious or maybe the lapsed religious, people who don't necessarily wear that atheism banner, it's still sort of assumed that religion is a moral good, that, you can maybe use it as cover if you're not like sincerely religious, or that you can use that as a good moral thing and then sort of fall away from it. But it's always presumed that religion is inherently a moral thing to be a part of. So therefore, if you are a Mormon housewife or some of these like other titles, well, then you can't be that bad, even if you did a bad thing once.
Yeah. And while like the media landscape is a little bit different in the UK than it is in the US. The default position of religious people are good is absolutely shot through all of our media. I could list off a handful of characters off the top of my head, several shows that are doing that same thing, normalizing things. Comedy shows like Father Ted and The Vicar of Dibley, where the main characters are themselves members of faith, and they have their wacky hijinks and whatever. And isn't it funny that one Catholic priest is like old and curmudgeonly and swears a lot, and it's like, ooh, that's hilarious. But it never really brings the power structures of those organizations into account. It never has the characters really dealing with some of the problems that we on the outside see. I never saw, unless there was a special episode of Father Ted, I didn't see where they were having to justify biblical slavery. I didn't catch that one. And yeah, just whole swaths of characters who are either religious or religiously inclined, who are good people, and their faith makes them good people. Mm-hmm. And that being faithful is seen as a virtue, whereas we skeptics go, no, being faith is a terrible way to come to truth. we don't find it virtuous. It's basically synonymous with gullibility in a lot of our eyes.
Yeah. Well, and it sets up a dynamic in our society because it also perpetuates, like sitting here thinking about like our justice system and how to get early parole, essentially you have to express a faith in a God that gives you such preferential treatment on getting parole and things like that, or gets a lighter sentence before even going into our prison system. But like that dynamic, and I saw it in the military too, where essentially the default position is that a godly or a faithful person has to be proven to be bad. Whereas if you don't have some kind of theological faith-based system, you have to prove that you're good at the outset. So it's one is a negative proposition, the other is a positive proposition of like one has to prove that we're good in the first place to then, okay, now let's talk about the bad behavior you're being accused of. Whereas the other already has that first hurdle covered, and they're just granted that by our society.
And of course, I come from the ironically privileged position in that I've had faith around me my whole life. And it's never really touched me. In that, like, my grandparents on my mother's side were devoutly Catholic. 2-month-old holy water don't taste nice, I can tell you that for nothing.
The blessings don't have a cucumber taste.
No. And then there's and then there's the fact that I come from a country that has a state religion where the head of state is also head of church. I went to a school where part of the emblem was a cross. It was Abbey Junior School, and we sung hymns and did prayers, and yet it all was presented in this very, like, this is just kind of a thing we do, almost secularizing religious practice. I mean, the joke is that Anglicanism, also known as Episcopalianism here, is more of a hobby than a religion.
That was what I grew up in. I was Episcopalian growing up.
And the thing is that I then, in my career, started out, like, my first big proper job was I was a civil servant for a year. And then I went into working in an NGO non-profit where religion was obviously an aspect of some of the things we did because people have religion. And I lived in Birmingham, which is one of the biggest melting pots of different religions as well. And then when I moved over here, all of my friends that I made were non-religious. I linked up with you guys and the company, or the charity I work for here in the USA and have done for 10 years, is while they recognise religion and they recognise the importance of it in some people's lives, it is a very secular organisation and very, very progressive in the way that they go about their policies. So I've been kind of insulated against a lot of it, and I'm kind of lucky that way. And then the one last thing I would say about how religion is seen in the media, not just in reality TV, is that especially for people of my generation, we still have the spectre of sectarian violence, where words like Protestant and Catholic came in the same newsreels as terrorist and threat and deaths and violence. And it's like, oh, right, so not all good then. And that was right on our doorstep.
Yeah, I hear it, and I am, I guess, curious how we will continue to portray religion in media. You know, a lot of the tropes that you see in TV no longer match our reality as a culture. And, you know, it's typical for some of these things to sort of lag behind. But as we see less and less religiosity among the general population, how do you sort of shortcut to the audience that this kindly old gentleman is a good guy if you don't make him a priest? You know, how will those things continue to evolve?
Well, I think that my ideal would be, again, not to be a dirty nerd, but kind of how places like Japan deal with religion. Like, they had state religions and were very religious for a while, but that has now become far more of a secular, and feel free to correct me, anyone who's an actual expert in Japanese culture, do feel free to talk my amateur ass down from the ledge, but from what I've observed, religion is more of a cultural practice. Yes, those signifiers, the old Shinto monk who's sweeping leaves under the Torii gates, seen as often as a sort of a symbol of calm and goodness. But that's what I'm kind of hoping where we're going to end up with the religions of our society. Don't know whether it's actually going to be able to be possible, but we still go to mass, we still do Christmas, we still do things like you sing hymns and whatever, in the full knowledge that none of it's real, and that we can still use the kind of old trope of the priest, but it might be that it's like, yeah, well, I am a priest of this church, but I'm more of a curator of history and culture than a person who's trying to convince you of a real deity. And divorced from that essence of control, of like, I am an avatar of divine control, it may even improve the optics of these people who are now transitioning into keepers of historic faith in history and culturally without proselytizing it. But that's pretty idealistic for me. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I see Lisa waiting on the line. Before we jump over to that, Ben, was there anything else that you wanted to make sure to touch base on this topic?
Yeah, it's fascinating. We live in kind of a moment, because your question was, how do we move forward with this, and how do we see society, well, hopefully adjusting to a more secular population? And it's weird to answer that when we're kind of in this cultural moment where the opposite is happening. Like, yes, the number of religious people is in decline, but those that are still
religious
left
power is maybe on the rise.
Right. We have people actively campaigning to remove separation of church and state, and effectively allow the government to dictate to, like here in Texas, we had SB 10 that, like, thankfully has been stopped in the courts, but even Ken Paxton and the governor are trying to penalize schools that they're telling school districts, you still need to follow this, even though there's been a stay in federal court. Because they want to force this so badly.
Outside of the state or outside of the states, we're talking about legislation that required the posting of the 10 Commandments in all public school systems.
Yeah, thanks.
In every public school classroom, in fact.
Mm-hmm. And so it's weird to answer of, like, I would love, I guess, like, in this moment, because of where we're at in our society right now, I think it's going to create more friction points in the interim time until we get to a point of even just returning to kind of the norm of, okay, yeah, we shouldn't force people to pray. We can't force our beliefs onto other people. Like, we got to get back to that norm first. That even then, like in the 90s and early 2000s, even then, being an atheist was difficult. You still had to, like, fight for your rights in the courts and what have you. And, like, so first we need to even get back to that norm before then we can continue the project of how do we actually further secularize and separate these two major institutions. And so those are kind of my thoughts. It's, I think, a really great question and thing to reflect on, but oh boy, is it fuzzy and complicated at the moment.
Yeah. All I'll add to it is from where I'm sitting, the two of you have both described sort of different relationships with religion with regards to the individual and the state.
Yeah.
You know, the notion of, oh, we'll all just sort of pay lip service to it and we won't actually believe it, but it'll still take up a big part of our lives and it'll still be sort of all around us all the time. That's a scary notion. Like, yes, do I prefer a benign religion to a, like, active and hostile one? I suppose so. But do I really want my kid to feel obligated to be, like, reciting prayers at schools and to have, these hymns sort of in every part of our culture? Like, it is scary to be thinking about the direction that the United States' culture is heading in terms of what we have made normal from our government.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, Jamie, thank you for your insights. We'll touch base with you again at the end of the show. But for now, let's talk to Lisa in Canada about that old adage. I've heard this a million times. Say it with me. It's not a religion. It's a relationship. Lisa, tell us what's on your mind.
I'm an atheist, and I sometimes have discussions about religion, and that's just something I commonly hear. And I just wanted to ask you, I just wanted to ask what you would say if someone said that, because I mean, there are people who don't invest in church, or they don't go to church. And I think maybe that's a bit different. But I think personally that they frame it that way because there's a negative connotation to the word religion, and so it's kind of a verbal manipulation, I think.
Oh, yeah. No, it's whatever we say it is. And if you don't like that, then we'll just say it's something different, and it's fine. Like, yeah, I mean, it's pretty philosophically weak and indefensible. And if we were going in that route, I might ask, okay, what is a relationship? What is a religion, actually? How is it that your religion is not a religion, but other religions are a religion? What does it mean that this is a relationship? How are other religions not also a relationship? But, I don't know that that's necessarily going to get you very far with the types of folks who are using these trite phrases. Ben, what is sort of the first thought that comes to your mind when you hear that phrase?
I mean, what first comes to mind is there's sort of the snarky response of like, yes, I have a relationship. I don't believe in quantum physics. I have a relationship with quantum physics.
Right. Yeah.
But then there's also just the less snarky second response is I have a lot of other religious people telling me they have a relationship with Allah or Shiva or Vishnu or Mithra or what have you. So like, how do I tell? How do we know? Like you're all, or even amongst Christians, you're all telling me the relationship you have with this thing. They're all reporting very differently what the thing is, and so is it like three gods in a trench coat? Like, what is the relationship, and how do I tell which one's the real relationship and which is just people pontificating?
But you gotta have faith.
Do you, though? Yeah, so those are kind of my two immediate thoughts. That, like, when someone, because of course we've all heard this or had this leveled at us, that immediately popped into my head is kind of being a snarky person, and then a second one that's just like, is there real efficacy to this, and how are you differentiating what you perceive to be a relationship versus the other people, even of your own professed faith, are reporting this relationship differently?
Yeah, I'll co-sign the notion that snark rarely furthers the conversation or leads to, meaningful mutual understanding.
Yep.
And I'll also kind of acknowledge that if somebody is throwing such a bland platitude at me, snark might be appropriate depending on the context. Maybe it won't further the conversation, but also, like, it doesn't further the conversation for you to just throw some nonsense word salad at me. And while I don't want to be necessarily rude to anybody, sometimes it is a little bit appropriate to call that shit out when you see it. That being said, Lisa, tell us about your experiences, like what kinds of conversations you're having, and maybe what you're hoping to get out of this call in terms of how you might do those differently or perhaps even a little bit better.
Well, my first thought when I hear that is I say that, well, religion, from one of the reasons why religion was created, because it was created as a way for social cohesion. One of the ways. And, if I tell you, don't grow your crops next to me, you're probably not going to care that much. But if I say to you, God says that you'll go to eternal hell if you plant your crops near mine, well, that might, people of a time that were very superstitious, because they didn't have the science that we have now. Like, they needed answers. Why does the sun go down? Why did this storm happen when it didn't happen last year? And people don't like uncertainty. We don't like not knowing things. And I think that's kind of the way I look at it, and I say religion is more of a systematic thing, believing in God and just not investing in an socially organized system. That's more spirituality based. And then I also kind of go into saying, sometimes I hear from them, they say, the Holy Spirit worked through the people who wrote down the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, of course they wrote that down, because almost no one knew how to read. And they're the ones.
Well, it justifies that what I wrote is correct because God told me to write it. It's not me, it's the Lord who works through me.
I'm also really fascinated. Like, why did they stop? Like, if that was your mechanism for trying to convey truth to people, and like you want to relay a message, you just did it one time, like 1,000 years ago, and then you're like, nah, we're not doing that anymore. Like, no one believes that anyone right now today has the Holy Spirit reaching through them to scrawl the correct words onto a sheet of paper to report to the world. Right. It just happened this one time, this very narrow band moment. And then we was like, well, don't.
I do hear that, but I think that you're hitting on an important part of the it's not a religion, it's a relationship framework, which is that, well, don't worry about religion. Don't compare our religion to other religions. Yeah. Don't analyze the concept of religion. Just listen to that feeling of the Holy Spirit inside of you. And when we turn inwardly and we stop thinking rationally and we're just looking at these very vague and nebulous ideas of emotion, it is very easy to trick yourself. I would certainly say that you're right, Ben. Nobody is, broadly speaking, we're not believing that somebody else has come out with the perfect inerrant word of God written down, at least not in our current generation, at least not out, in our mainstream religions. But I would say it is a mainstream belief in Christianity and in many other belief systems that there is God speaking to you as a still, quiet voice, as your conscious, as the Holy Spirit, as all of these things coming in, and that your intuition or your emotions that you don't fully understand are actually the Lord speaking to you. And, from my perspective, studying psychology, I'll just say, our emotions are just a bunch of different ideas stacked on a trench coat. They are not always coherent and organized and logical. Our thoughts and our feelings and all of these physical sensations that go on inside of our body are very messy and vague and nebulous. And you can start to divine things from them that are really just kind of static noise.
Yeah. And then sometimes I say when they come back, I'm just trying to explain. I'm not trying to win the conversation. Sure. I'm just trying to saying, can't you see the flaws in this reasoning, kind of thing, right? Because it's easier to pick apart an argument than to defend one, right? And sometimes, when I hear this, it pisses me off. It's kind of like, well, where else do you get your morals from? We want to have a bibliocentric world, and it was like, we're following the Bible back to, going back to God and creating our society the way that the Bible instructs us to. And I'm like, you want to go back to a time where stoning people was okay? Even if they were innocent?
Some of them
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I said, you want to go back to a time where, children can get clawed by a bear sent by God because they made fun of a bald man?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the morality of the Bible does not pass the sniff test. Yeah. And you can point that out to Christians, but rarely will you get particularly far with it. I do think, though, that you can kind of establish you're already using your own judgment, your own reason, your own rationality in trying to decide what is moral. And sure, you can pull from different Bible verses and say, God said this or God said that. But when you're doing that, you're ignoring all of the other Bible verses. And how are you doing that? What allows you to do that? Your sense of wisdom, whether it's particularly wise or not, you're using reason and you're using rationality to make those decisions.
Yes, and I became atheist. I kind of, in my life, I've kind of gone back and forth. Is there a God? Is there not a God? And I come to a place now where I can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And
Sure.
I remember, though, when I was questioning, well, I don't know if I was questioning, I guess I was struggling because I didn't want to lose part of my identity.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in a household where my parents said, if you live in this household, you're Catholic. So can you? Yeah. And I was attending a Bible study, and the person who was heading it was a Roman Catholic nun. And she said, we were talking about it. I can't remember the passage, but she said, even if we don't understand God's rules, they're still better. They're still good for us. Like, we may not understand that they're good, but He is all good, and He is just doing the best for us. And I remember raising my hand, and I said, well, what about passages in the Bible where, if your son is being a drunkard, an annoying drunkard, you can sacrifice your son to God, or like all the Egyptian babies that were killed for only existing during the Exodus story.
Yeah, the sanctioning of rape, the sanctioning of slavery and genocide and all of these problems. It is really hard to take seriously somebody who says, well, I get my morality from the Bible.
And then what she told me after was that my participation was inappropriate. and I was kind of like confused because I'm also on the spectrum. So I was like, I don't understand how it was inappropriate. And the person next to me in that prayer group came up to me, and she said, I was just asking a question. I was just challenging the Bible. And he's like, yeah, Bible study is not challenging the passage. It's reading the passage and saying, this is what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
affirmation.
I was like, that's stupid. And well, I mean, I didn't say that out loud, but I was like, that's dumb. Why would I just accept something without questioning it? And, so yeah, in my atheism journey, there were times where I kind of went back and forth, kind of like a loss of identity, and also just a little bit of social pressure. I was, especially when I have a relapse of my illness, I'm more vulnerable to accepting religious ideas. It will heal you. You will get better, and you're. Well, and
so much of that.
Sometimes it is a challenge, and I guess I just wanted to call to ask you what you would say, because and the reason I told that story about the Bible study thing is I wanted to illustrate that they always say, of course you can ask questions, of course. It's good to be knowledgeable, but when you ask a question in critique of it, that's when they don't like it.
Those questions, just not those questions. Those are the wrong questions. Incorrect. Right. Yeah.
And I think they don't. And I think some people who are deeply, deeply ingrained in their ideology. I'm not talking about the random person who just goes to church and then goes home and lives their life. I'm talking about like people who are deeply embedded in. They don't like to. I think because the way they're learning to ask questions is affirming instead of critical. I think that is an extra hurdle for them to really. I think it's an extra hurdle for I don't want to say see the truth, because of course I could be wrong. There could be a God. I could be wrong, but yeah, when you're, I think they deliberately confuse critical thinking with affirming questions. And I think that's a big hurdle in certain movements like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's honestly a way to kind of suss out, at least in my experience, it's a way to suss out if someone is trying to peddle something versus if someone is trying to seek truth, when they will solicit questions, but the only ones they'll consider valid are the ones that are seeking to affirm, like asking questions of like, how do I get over this? Like, I see this stuff where it conflicts. What is the way that I rationalize this? They don't use those terms, but the like affirming style questions that they then factor and say, like, this is, questioning and exploring your faith, but it's one that's designed to perpetuate the faith or to reinforce the faith versus actual truth-seeking questions, one that can deconstruct things or be critical of it. And if you encounter someone, whether they're trying to sell you a used car or they're trying to sell you on a religion, and you once you see it happen in practice, it's hard to unsee it when someone narrows the band of valid question to ones that seek to reaffirm the original premise. And it kind of gets into like why, like when science does that, it's a quick way to realize like, oh, these people were seeking to prove a thing rather than seeking to find how a thing actually is.
Okay, well, that's all I wanted to know. I just wanted to ask what you guys how you would address that. I'm not online every day, looking for theists or whatever, but I'm just, if the conversation ever comes up, I don't want to just, it feels wrong for me to just silently nod.
And, sure.
Because it seems,
well, and one thing that...
I don't know.
Yeah, one thing that I remembered after I was listing, like, the things that came to mind, another one that's just kind of the, like, more calculated deconstruction of this, and Christy kind of got to it, to a certain extent, there's evidence that a lot of this, it's not a religion, it's a relationship, is they're actually just renaming having a relationship with yourself. Or even when they're like, when you're going through the thoughts in your brain and they're like, oh, this is the Lord speaking to it. Like, no, that's you. And we have the scientific studies that show when people are asked what is so-and-so's opinion on like the color blue versus what is your opinion on the color blue, different parts of the brain light up. And then when we ask people, what does God think about the color blue? The part that's you lights up. Not like people aren't reporting God's opinion on a thing. They're actually reporting their own. And I think that's something they've weaponized, or they've sort of redefined and recaptured what is actually just our internal monologue. What is your own conscience? To basically turn it like, oh no, that's God. That's God guiding you. But if that voice is wrong, that's you then. So if it's right and it comports with my version of the faith, then that's God speaking through you. If it's incorrect, that's you.
I just want to say before I end, because I kind of want to, I know you guys preferably take theist calls, but I just want to say at the end to anyone of faith watching, we don't want to convert you to atheism. We don't want you to feel sad about losing an identity. It's just really about being able to criticize our ideas. And, as long as someone's ideology is not causing harm to a person or themselves, and you're not putting it in government and forcing other people to adhere to it, and if your religion works for you in your everyday life, and, go for it, right? I'm not saying I want people to become atheists, and that's the only message I wanted to leave with. Is, I do respect that people of faith have a right to believe what they believe in. I only get angry when it's trying to be implemented universally that everyone has to, right? So.
Yeah, well, I very much appreciate your call. And yeah, I recognize how frustrating it can be to deal with some of these tropes and some of these like pat answers and phrases. I hope that you can sort of accept them in the spirit that they are offered and respond in kind and hopefully move towards a more loving and just world. Thank you so much for sharing Prayer Your Sunday with us.
Okay, yeah. You guys take care.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, I think, Ben, we're going to talk to Anne here in just a moment. But first, I want to thank our top 5 patrons.
Ooh, yeah.
This week, our top 5 patrons are number 1, Oops, All Singularity, Dingleberry Jackson, Kalevi Helveti, just the period. I don't know how best we're addressing that, how everybody else is doing it. It's brilliant. Thanks for tripping us up every week. And in the number 5 spot is Casey Kickendell. Our honorable mention right now is Kat. Thank you to everybody who gave to us on Patreon. If you want to have your name read on the air, please consider supporting us at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. I also, Ben, have a quick super chat for you. I think this is worth kicking around for a moment. Did ancient cultures fight wars over their gods? Or is war over religion confined to just the Abrahamic God? I think that's a pretty easy softball down the middle of the plate. What you got?
We have lots of evidence of conflict and war over religious beliefs prior to the Judeo-Christian tradition. There's a whole book in the Bhagavad Gita that is explicitly about a war that took place. And that all predates our current mythos of or purported history of Christian and Jewish and Muslim belief systems.
I'm not a archaeologist or anthropologist myself, but as I understand it, there is enough evidence of, quote, religious wars going back far enough that you really have to start redefining the word religion and the word war as you go through it, because, is 50 people from one tribe fighting another tribe, is this a war? It's always been a part of who we are to be at war or in conflict. And religion is definitely one of those uniting, motivating forces that people can rally behind.
Yeah, and even in the European tradition, we have the wars that took place around Athens and Greece, and all different city-states had different deities that they worshipped and considered to be the most powerful amongst them. And then even the wars with Persia that took place around that time. That was pretty explicitly, they had different pantheons of gods. So I understand the predilection to say this is unique to kind of Judeo-Christian tradition, because it could be argued that Christians in particular got it a very specific type of absolute war. But that there's so much history and so much evidence out there that it does in fact, religious conflict vastly predates Christianity.
Fair to say. Okay, well, let's talk quickly here at the end of the show with Anne in California, who is interested in arguments for morality. Anne, what do you got for us today?
Oh, hello, Christy and Ben. How are you today?
Doing all right. Thanks so much.
Good. Well, I just have a question because I watch some of these shows and a lot of times theists will call in, and I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush. It's because I don't think any group is a monolith, but, they'll ask the atheist host, if you don't believe in a God, where do you get your morality from?
Mm-hmm.
And the host will then point to certain Bible verses, especially in the Old Testament, and say, well, this is from the Bible. This is from your book. This is from your God. And
establishing
some of them,
that the Bible is not moral? Is what you're making?
The slavery passages and
sure.
Killing all of the men, women, and little boys and keeping all the girls and those types of passages, the condoning rape, like when God had, I forget the name, raped 10 of David's wives.
Yeah, I
because of
mean,
something
we talked about it a
David
little bit
did.
early on
Yeah.
the show, but there is plenty to
Yeah.
pick apart in the Christian Bible and a great number of other faith traditions when it comes to quote unquote objective morality.
Well, in zooming out, usually that's an effort and it is one whole tract to just demonstrate that, like, oh, well, you don't actually use your Bible either. So you have a secular faith or a secular moral system that you then are cherry picking parts of the Bible. And so some people skip that part of explaining or the part of the argument and they get just to write like, well, the Bible doesn't have great morality too, but that's actually part of a larger argument of actually you do too. There are philosophers that have actually argued that there's no such thing as a theological ethical system because there's many ethical beliefs. I was talking about the study earlier that, the voice in your head is actually just, it's not God, it's you. And the extrapolation of that is there are as many religions as there are people to purport to be religious. And so that would go with ethical systems too, because if you want to think there's a consistent like Christian, because we pick on them the most, Christian ethics, the fastest way to disprove that is to get two Christians in a room and start asking them questions about ethics, and you'll get two very different perspectives. And so that's the route I oftentimes will go when people level like, oh, if you're an atheist, you can't be moral. It's that like, well, actually, like none of you are actually utilizing this because I can ask any number of Christians and I'll get that many different answers to what is or isn't moral.
Right. And some will say, well, God says it, so it's right. And sometimes I wonder if that's their morals and they're kind of hiding behind their God.
Yep.
Hiding behind is a profound way of framing it, though.
Yeah.
Certainly for some people, there is that sort of like manipulative, twisting their mustache and cackling, ha, 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 I will lie to everybody about what God believes. But I think for a great number of people, it's like, no, God clearly believes this. It's obvious. It's in the Bible that I kind of half remember from that one priest that read that thing that one time. I do believe in the sincerity of most Christian beliefs. I do believe that most Christians believe what they believe or believe what they say that they believe, even if it is poorly examined and they're not really recognizing how much of themselves they're putting into it.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a bit of a delay, but I was going to say the other element to kind of the question that you asked that comes to mind for me is the postulation of like, or the question that gets leveled at the atheist is where do you get your morality from? And usually I'll ask, like, do you believe that people that don't have a God belief can still believe things? And if they say yes to that, then it's like, well, I believe in things like well-being and kindness and empathy. I don't think those need to be grounded in some kind of theological belief. And so if you accept the proposition that I can believe stuff and not believe in a God, then you can accept the idea that I believe that empathy matters and I can derive a moral system from well-being and from empathy. If they attempt to deny that, then you're getting into a whole different argument set.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And I just want to say thank you for answering my question in the super chat. You guys started talking about so many things. I'm like, I want to talk about all of this. I want to talk about reality TV. Because everything you were talking about was so interesting. But I do appreciate you answering the question I sent in my super chat. So.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for your donation and being part of this community.
Oh, I love this community.
All right. Well, you have a great rest of your Sunday, and thank you for giving us a call.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And enjoy continuing to be good without gods.
Fair to say. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's go ahead and bring Jamie the Blind Limey in one more time just to say thank you and see what Jamie thought of the show before we wrap up for the day. Oh, Jamie, I believe you're muted.
I thought I clicked the button.
Uh-huh.
I am kind of doing it at distance, which is difficult for me. But anyway,
Sure.
Excuses.
I mean, it's just a brag at that point.
Yeah, I'm a hosting wizard. Talk by sense of smell. Anyway, the show. Yes, talk about the show. Pleasant calls all around, in some interesting talking points. As for talking to people who want to take the religion out of faith and try and soften it that way, it's like, I mean, where did you get your faith from then, if not from this book? And if you got it from, this is just how I feel that God spoke to me, I would start questioning them, things like, well, how did you come up with that concept of God? Mm-hmm. What if you'd lived in a different country or a different time? Would your concept of God have been framed differently? What does God look like to you? Why even call it God?
Why not just go back to the drawing board? If you're going to, create your own moral system, like, let's do it intentionally and from scratch.
And then that point on, like, where do you get your morality from? I mean, like, that's actually quite a complex question.
Yeah.
And very much like religion, as compared to reality, they have an answer, and it's a really simple and easy one for them, but it has very little explanatory power and falls apart under even the slightest scrutiny. Whereas I'm like, well, do you really want to get into evolution and anthropology and ethics and shifting moral thoughts, and what is morality anyway? Am I just an ethical person? And like natural imperative, and also the fight against certain natural imperatives? Because it's a big answer. And I don't think that's what you want. You don't want that big answer. You want a snappy soundbite that you can debunk me on some level. That, look at this immoral atheist who wants to be nice to people and stuff. Shake my finger.
Yeah.
That tends to be where those moralities go. And then if you get down to divine command theory, that's only one step up from flipping presuppositionalist.
Don't read Soren Kierkegaard.
Yeah. So, fantastic to back you all up. Thanks for having me on. And really looking forward to some of the stuff we're going to be getting organised at the library and with the ACA more broadly.
Yeah, we got a bunch of different new stuff going on. I guess the Philosophy Night's not particularly new, but anyone in the Central Texas, or if you want to come drive down, every Wednesday at 7 o'clock Central, we have a Philosophy Night, and we've been partnering with Genetically Modified Skeptic. He hosts the Philosophy Night at we call it Starfleet Philosophy because we talk about Star Trek and philosophy the first Wednesday of every month, and that's been a joy. And then occasionally bring in a friend of mine who's a philosophy professor at Austin Community College. He comes in and shares wisdom. And then the rest of the time, it's just me pontificating or sharing different videos and ideas, which is really fun. But that's available. We have the Secular Sisterhoods. Today we have a drag queen story hour going on in the building. So anyone that's able to come in or lives in the area, we have a lot of stuff going on, and you can find that on Meetup at Free Thought Library on Meetup. So we're building out and doing a lot of really fun stuff at the building. And like Jamie has come and volunteered for the Vanguard project. We've packed Narcan kits for Austin Mutual Aid. We're going to be helping out at Round Rock Pride by handing out waters at that event and just doing the things we can to give back to the community and get atheists and secular folks out into the world. I think especially right now with how much darkness there is that's happening, giving people an avenue to go out and do good and just help support each other is more important than ever.
Yeah, well said. Thank you for walking us through so many of those things. There's so many events I wasn't even aware of. The Drag Queen Story Hour going on today. That's fantastic work, and I am just so proud to be a part of this organization. Before we send out love rings, any final thoughts today?
Just think with a humanist mind, think with a rational mind, be a skeptic. Atheism tends to just follow after all that.
Yeah, and for me, it'd be find community, help, and where there is no community, build community. And if you ever need help, you can reach us at TV@, or you can reach me at chair@atheist-community.org. If you have questions on like how to build a community, how to find people, how to create spaces, or how to just find the ones that already exist, the one thing we have right now is each other. And especially as our government retreats from social support and social aid, the only thing we have left is each other, and we can try to help build communities and try to be there for one another in facing all of this.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, I definitely want to send out a love ring to Sophia, who is homesick this morning, but also to you, Ben, and to everybody who is organizing the upcoming fundraiser and who is putting on all of these incredible events and who is making the atheist community of Austin outside of the Atheist Experience Network. Every week we thank all of the people involved with these shows, but it's such a small part of this community and all of the hard work that y'all are doing. And I am just so grateful. Want to send out lots of love to all of those fine folks. Who else do y'all want to send love rings to before we step out the door today?
Oh, the crew and the volunteers.
Yeah.
We couldn't do this. Like they had to adjust fire for today to get me sitting in this chair, and we appreciate so much the work that our crew and our volunteers all do, helping us put emails together, helping us reach out to other nonprofits, help us to put these shows on and make this happen. There's so many different parts that go into this, and people donate so many hours of their lives. So I want to give a huge shout out to all of them.
And I am. I'll just follow up on the kinds of calls we had today. People who are deconstructing, have deconstructed, or are wrangling with their faith. You've always got an empathetic ear with us. And if you are a person of faith, again, like, we don't bite as long as you're polite. Like, we really do want to have conversations with you, and actual conversations. We're not here to have a fight unless you make us fight. We're here to talk. That's why it's called Talk Heathen.
Yeah, well, to both of those points, I'll just say now that if you don't believe, this really is your community with all kinds of fascinating discussions and story hours and other great activities. This is your community, and we appreciate you being here. And if you do believe, we absolutely do not hate you. We're just not convinced.
We want the truth. So watch Truth Wanted Live, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect online at tiny.cc/call-TW.